Have you heard of the concept of abstainers versus moderators? Well, if not, I want to give you a little TLDR, and then we're going to get into the real thing we're going to be talking about today, this concept of bright line rules. But we need to give a little bit of backstory before we get there. So, abstainers versus moderators. Moderators are typically people who find it easier to do a little of something than to restrict themselves entirely. And abstainers are the opposite. Abstainers are people who typically find it easier to abstain entirely from something than to do just a little bit of it or to have just a little bit of it, right? But these two modes, like, are they the only modes? And sometimes they're a little bit fraught, right? Sometimes moderation can be really hard. And it also can feel like a little bit of a slippery slope, right? What does moderation mean? How much is too much? How little is too little? And then abstaining, even when it quote works, even if you're someone for whom it works, it can feel a little restrictive. And it also has this big risk in that if you slip up, even once, it feels devastating, right? You can sink into that all or nothing framework. You can say, well, I ate a piece of pizza, so I might as well have the whole thing, right? We can get into that kind of all or nothing thinking. And both of these, they might feel like maybe not the right move for you. So we can think of bright line rules as kind of this happy medium in between the abstaining versus the moderating. It's a way for us to, make some rules that we can only decide, we just have to decide once, right? We don't have to be stuck in decision fatigue. And it's a way for us to have some kind of guidelines for ourselves when maybe we're feeling at our weakest, when maybe we are lacking in willpower, when we are lacking in energy, when we're low on reserves. It can be helpful to have these sort of less restrictive rules that allow us to continue to make good choices, continue to maintain our good habits for ourselves. So I want to give you some examples of what bright line rules might look like, give you a couple from my own life, and then I'm going to share some that some of my clients have and some of my friends have had for themselves that have helped them to kind of maintain the good decisions, the good habits that they want to have without relying so much on willpower, without feeling like they're kind of yo-yoing or going back between moderating and abstaining or feeling too restricted or, all of those things. Okay, so I'm going to give you some examples. So for me, I'll give you two examples. The first one is TikTok. TikTok is, I love it as a consumer. I know it's not great for me. Like a lot of social media is not something I want to be spending all my time on, certainly. But it's also something where I tried moderating, just doing a little bit at a time. It's too hard. It's too hard to shut it off. I tried abstaining. I tried taking it off of my phone. Also, I just put it back on, right? That did not work, right? What did work for me was when I started to make a bright line rule about TikTok for myself. Right. And so this rule is simply that I am only allowed to access it on the weekend evenings. Right. So Friday and Saturday nights, that's a time when I can feel free to indulge in as much TikTok as I want because there's not really any consequence for that. Right. I don't have to get up early the next morning for work. I don't feel like I'm like wasting time during the middle of the day. I'm not likely to get pulled into something. Like the worst case scenario would be like I fall asleep while watching it, which, not the greatest, but also whatever. It's the weekend. It's fine, right? So I have this rule for myself. Now, I have this rule for myself just in theory, but also I have it on my phone so that I have it so that I can't actually access TikTok outside of those hours, right? Now, I could turn that off, but it takes a lot of effort to do so. So that's TikTok for me, right? And I feel a little embarrassed even kind of admitting this to you that I have to have these rules around this for myself, but it's true, I do. Now, another one is around alcohol. Like I've never been like a huge lush or anything, but I'm also definitely not a teetotaler. And I like to indulge in a glass of wine or a cocktail, every now and again. And in fact, probably every week, right? And so a long time ago, probably when my kids were little, I was drinking like a little bit more than I thought was good for me or than I wanted to. And so I just made myself a bright line rule that I have had ever since, right? So for well over a decade, I've had this bright line rule and it works really well for me. And it's simply that I don't indulge in any alcohol Monday through Thursday unless I'm going to be out with friends, like at a book club or having dinner or something like that. And let's just say that, as a mom running a full-time business, This is just not something that comes up that often. I'm not like out that often on a Monday through Thursday. So it's pretty, it's not like that is, having a big factor in this, right? So just I don't drink any alcohol Monday through Thursday, and that works really well for me. It's not abstaining entirely. That would be far too restrictive. It's also not trying to moderate in a way where I'm now, every time I'm having a glass of wine, am I asking myself, should I have another or should I stop here? It's a lot less decision fatigue around those things, right? Now, what are some examples that other people have given me, right? I'm sure you want to hear other examples that aren't just mine, right? I remember I was working with someone once who wanted to eat less sugar. And as a result, she made a rule for herself that the only time she had dessert was when she was at a restaurant. Now, if you eat out all the time, maybe this wouldn't be the right rule for you, but she didn't. She didn't eat out that often. And so for her, it felt like a good rule and a nice treat when she was eating out. I remember I had a friend who I thought this was so brilliant. I've probably used this in a lot of different examples, but she had a rule, a bright line rule around exercise. And that was simply that she didn't miss more than one day in a row. So she never missed 2 days. And this allowed herself a lot of grace, right? If she was not feeling up to it, if she was tired, if she ran out of time, no problem, right? She could skip that day and she could skip that day without guilt. But she just made it sure that the next day she was getting some exercise, even if it was a small amount. So that little rule helped her kind of stay on track without falling into that all or nothing, like, "Ugh, it's all for naught, right? Maybe sometimes people have, or some of my clients have had rules around their time off, right? Maybe they decided that they were going to say, I'm not checking email after 7 p.m., right? So it's okay for me to check email until then, but it's not okay for me to check email after that. And in that way, they were still, getting done what they needed to done, but also they had a clear line. They didn't need to be asking themselves, well, I don't know, there's a lot going on at work today. Should I check my email tonight? What if there's going to be something that blows up in my face in the morning? No, they just had a bright line rule around it. So I want to ask you, have you used bright line rules before? If not, can you think of anything in your own life or your own time management, et cetera, that it would be useful to have a bright line rule around? And tell me in the comments. And then, of course, if you want to keep getting content like this right in your feed, then make sure that you like and subscribe. See you next week.
Hi, Do More Stress Lessers. Just like she said, make sure to like and subscribe if you want to get this content on your feed every time that we post a new video. Thank you.